Hello, today we're starting a new series of videos. These are on ML system design, and as the first video, I would like to focus on the template that you could use to solve your ML system design problems. So let us look at the template and then try to understand what each of the steps can mean. So the first step is always the requirement gathering. Okay, so when you've been provided with some problem, which might be like create a recommendation feed or detect harmful content or something, these problems are going to be in very ambiguous situation. They're not going to have all of the details that you need to solve the problem. So the first step has to be about gathering your requirements. Now, when you're thinking about requirement gathering, there are few things that you need to think about. One is the functional requirements, and the other one is the non-functional. So the functional requirements have to do with all of the business objectives. So what is the business objective that you're trying to solve? And using this, you have to convert this to an ML objective. Alright, I'm not going to go into more detail for now. We will be understanding all of this as we execute some real examples in the subsequent videos. Now let us look at what is non-functional. So non-functional has to do with some of the systemic requirements, right? So your ML system will always have to deal with four things, out of which three pillars are: you'll have to deal with the latency, you will have to deal with the performance, you'll have to deal with the scale, and another, let's draw it as a tangential one, which is sometimes the security aspect of things. Okay, looks fine. Yeah, so under the requirement gathering, we are talking about the functional and we are talking about the non-functional requirements. Once you have narrowed down these, you can start to think about scale at a very high number, at a very high level. So you can think about what is the scale that is required, what is the throughput, and you have to keep this thought process at a slightly high level so that it doesn't consume too much of your time. And this would be something around understanding what is your input size, what is your existing data volume, what is the request throughput, and bunch of other things which will basically be a deciding factor for your system design. We're not going to go into detail of what are all the possible parameters that you can look at. We will be reviewing each of these in the subsequent videos by looking at the real examples. Let me clear this off. Okay, so we're done with the requirement gathering. Now, post your requirement gathering, you can also have another step of assumptions, which we have sort of covered, and alignment. Okay, so now in this step, you have to make certain assumptions, especially if you're at a senior level. You're required to make assumptions and get them verified by your interviewer instead of bothering your interviewer by asking them numerous questions like how many users are there on the platform, how many daily active users are there, and so on. So these are some of the questions that you can make assumptions, and finally you can get them validated by your interview. So you can have assumption one, you can have assumption number two, three, and so on. And then finally, you can get them validated by an interviewer by asking, these are the assumptions that I'm making. Do you think these are valid, or there needs to be any change? And the interviewer will guide you accordingly. Another very important step of alignment apart from the validation that we're getting on our assumptions, is to lead the interviewer, is to lead the interview by telling your interviewer upfront what to expect. So think of this as your index or what to expect from your presentations, right? So you can tell the interviewer that next I'm going to be focusing on the big picture, or also called as high level design, followed by some data gathering step, and then you'll move into modeling, evaluation, deployment, and then we will also think about few bottlenecks. I mean, this you don't need to call out, you can just stop at this. um, and also most of the times it usually becomes difficult for people to get till the deploy step. So these are the critical ones, but if we are getting to this, very good. And what is also great is after we have completed our design, we are able to talk through the cons of the design, okay, which is what are the bottlenecks and how will it evolve in future. So this is a view that you need to give to your interviewer, and these will also be our next step. So right now we have understood the requirement gathering step with functional and non-functional. The functional is understanding the business objective and converting that into an ML problem to solve, and the non-functional is you're trying to understand what systemic part is important for you to consider. Is it the latency, the performance, scale, security, all of those things? While you also make a lot of assumptions and you get those aligned with their interview. All right. So now let's look at the big picture. Okay. So now let me also erase this part. Okay. Now we're talking about the big picture or the high level design. Now, if you think about the high level design, these are nothing but boxes connected with each other. Now, you're not detailing the functionality, they are all sort of black boxes, but at a high level, you have understood the flow of information. Okay, and you have identified that, okay, this is my particular input and this is the expected output. Another important thing that I missed was as part of the requirement gathering, it is good, and as part of our assumption, it's good to get our expected input and output validated as well. Okay, so we have validated that, and now we're starting to do the designing. Now, what this diagram will help you to do is it will help you to identify the high level modules, okay, some of which will be systems that you don't need to care about, like load balancers, some servers, and all that. But some of them will need to be ML components. Now, these are the important pieces that we will have to um, place our attention. Now, another important thing is right now we are just identifying these components, right? Now, there is a possibility that some components can be ML based systems and some need not be. So, having that understanding of whether a particular component is an ML component or not itself tells the interviewer that you are able to see, you are not just blindly patching ML systems wherever required, you're really thinking through the system. And now, when we're putting this together, each piece can have multiple trade-offs by itself. You could decide how you build that. So we will have to do all of those trade-off discussions when we go to low-level design. But at a high level here, once you start structuring this, you will realize a lot of gaps, and then you will realize, oh, I need another piece here, oh, I need a personalization piece here, oh, I need a ranking system here, and something like that, which is very important because it helps you understand how you're structuring your system, and it also helps the interviewer to think about the different pieces, get an understanding of your big picture thinking, and also helps the interviewer to focus on how you are progressing. So this um, looks quite simple, right? Like you're just putting a bunch of pieces, boxes together, and you have like a high level system ready. But in the interview settings, what can happen is that we can blank out, and it can become difficult for us to think about how it should be coded. Then one of the recommended strategies is that you start working backwards from output. So if the expected output is some personalized feed, then what you need just before that is sort of some re-ranker. And what are you re-ranking? You're basically re-ranking some results. So this has to be some sort of filter that has to come in. And what is the filter working on? It's working on even bigger base of data points, so there has to be a candidate generation step, and so on. So working back from the output really becomes helpful, and then once you have that high level idea, then you can start fleshing it out a little better, add few components in your high level design that you might have missed, and do a little bit more of polishing here. But once this step is done, you will feel a lot more confident about the problem, and so will the interviewer. Okay, let's move on from this step to the next step now. Okay, now we're done with the big picture. Next step will be the data gathering step. For the data gathering, start from identifying what are the numerous sources of data points. What are these? Okay, and then once these come in, you're not thinking about how are these labeled, how are we generating, or what features are we generating from here. Once you have done all of that, you're thinking about split, whether you have enough data to do train validation test or you don't. So then you're thinking about cross validation, and then once you have split your data, how are you getting it ready to be consumed by the model? There has to be some transformation step here. So you're thinking about all those pieces, and there is scope for trade-off analysis at every point, which will be very useful. Okay, I will erase this. The data part is done. Now we come to the modeling step. Now when we come to modeling step, we'll have to start thinking about what is the algorithm we are using, how are we training it, are we doing pre-training or are we doing fine tuning, or is there some reinforcement learning component to it? When we are training it, what is the loss that we are training it with? Once we have trained it, how are we evaluating it? Is there any baseline for me to evaluate with? And all of those things, right? So we will have to think about all of those things, and we'll also have to talk about what happens if something goes wrong. How do we debug? Okay, so either your model has overfit, underfit. Okay, some of this has happened. So how do you validate the performance of the model, comparing it with baseline? and then some of the offline metrics that you will be using. Okay, so that takes me to the next part, which is the evaluation. Okay, now there are a bunch of offline metrics that you can have based on the problem type. Are you doing a classification? Are you doing regression? Is this a generative problem, generative AI? So, what are your metrics? And in these metrics, doing the trade off analysis and identifying why a specific metric is preferred over the others. Okay, and why you should be using this in the present setting of the problem, and defining all of those things. That will be what you will be doing at this step. Now, once you've identified all of these metrics and let's say you've validated everything's looking good, now you're looking to deploy the system. So you have to talk a little bit about the deployment. There are different strategies of deployment. Are you doing shadow mode? Are you in A/B evaluation? Are you doing some blue-green deployment? So it'll be good to define how are you thinking about the deployment, how are you thinking about making, evaluating and making sure that your model is right for the production setup. Okay. Once all of these things are done, then we are actually done. Okay. But what is very important is that we have to think a little futuristic in this process, just like how we have to do in all of the other projects that we work in real life. We have to think about collecting feedback. We have to think about some of the bottlenecks that we have created or might happen in the future. Yeah, so this is the future evolution. If something happens, what does it mean? How do you evaluate those things and all of those? So if you take all these points into considerations, you have the template for your system design. Well, communication is a very important part of this interview. We have to be really crisp with our communication. Here, my template discussion itself has gone pretty long, so let's try to be a little sharp for our next video, which will be a use case that we will be implementing. Alright, that's it for now. Thank you. Bye bye.